One of the important principles of square foot gardening is to grow some of your crops vertically. You should make a plan for this before you plant them. As I say, plan first, plant later. I'm Dr. Denise DeBusk, and in this video, I'll discuss the benefits of vertical gardening, how to build a trellis, where to place it, and the plants that can be used. There are several benefits of vertical gardening, and it is definitely an extra you want to add. Vertical gardening can be a visual treat for the eyes because they can be designed as arches against boring walls or as a feature in the garden. It saves space because plants that normally spread out several feet can be grown in a foot or two of space. Plants grown vertically get more air circulation and sun. It also reduces some of the pests and diseases because it gets them off the ground where many pests may encounter them. In order to grow vertically, you need to have a sturdy frame and attach it to your square foot garden. The most classic trellis is 5 feet tall and 4 feet wide. It is built out of 1/2 inch electrical conduit, 2 5-foot pieces, and 1 4-foot piece. These are connected with 2 conduit elbow fittings. You drive 1/2 inch rebar about halfway into the ground to hold the frame. Spread out the trellis netting on a flat surface to make sure that there are no snares. Then tie the netting onto the 2 top corners. Cut the netting at each connection along the top bar so that you have a long strand to tie. Loop each strand over the top and knot it. Keep the netting straight across so it isn't crooked. You can attach the bottom of the trellis frame to a wooden box by using galvanized pipe straps. You can also build a trellis out of wood or wire. An A-frame trellis is good for cucumbers or tomatoes that need more support. The one in the photo is made of bamboo, but it may not be sturdy enough for all crops. You don't always have to have the trellis on the side either. It just depends on what your plan is. You can have it inside the garden as well. Just keep in mind that it would limit your planting of other crops to the north side due to shading. Having arches is also common. These often connect to 2 different beds. I have a cattle panel arch. 4 U-posts are driven into the ground and they are fastened to the paneling with zip ties. Since I don't own a truck, I purchased 2 8-foot pieces that were overlapped at the top and connected with zip ties to form the arch. There are also commercial trellises and arches you can purchase. There are different trellis construction plans in the Square Foot Gardening book. You should place a trellis along the north side of your garden box so that it doesn't shade the other plants. If you want a larger trellis, you can position the north side of a longer side of a box. For example, placing an 8-foot portion of a 4x8 square foot garden on the north side. You can also make a long and narrow box, such as a 2x12-foot box that holds only vertical crops along a fence or wall. To make it more decorative, you can always add some ornamental flowers or low-growing crops to the front grids. There are a variety of crops that can be grown vertically, including gourds, pumpkins, squash, tomatoes, cucumbers, melons, including watermelons, and pole beans. There are different space requirements for plants being grown vertically. You can see in the chart how many would be grown in 1 square foot compared to 2 square feet. In the photo, I had a master gardener that loved beans, so she planted 2 beds of bush beans and we planted a couple of different squashes on the trellises. I even grew my favorite spaghetti squash. You may be tempted to plant your crops and then add your trellis. Honestly, that is what I did because it can take time to organize and build the parts. If you are planting seeds, then you have a little time before the plants need a trellis. It is important to train them to a trellis before they use the ground to sprawl. Some crops like tomatoes will break if you try to manipulate them too late, such as putting a cage on them when they are too big. Yeah, I have some experience with that. Tomatoes require some kind of support, except maybe some bush tomatoes, so you need to place the support structure shortly after planting the transplant. Here's a bit more on tomatoes. When growing them vertically, make sure you leave a single stem and snip any suckers that produce. Wind the young growth through the net or tie them to stakes. The stems are fairly delicate, so you need to be careful with them. Here are some other tips for growing crops vertically. You may think that growing a watermelon or pumpkin would be impossible to do vertically, but it can be done. That is why it's important to have a sturdy trellis. Many heavier fruits are prone to slipping off the trellis and breaking due to their weight. You can alleviate the weight of the plant by placing pantyhose over them or a sling like pieces of an old t-shirt and securing the end to the trellis. That way the trellis is supporting the weight of the fruit, not the plant. For summer squash, you can grow the plant on a stake. You would secure the plant using flexible ties and cut the bottom leaves off. Squash is prone to powdery mildew, so this allows more air circulation. You can even plant leafy vegetables under them that can handle some shade to maximize your squares. So what are your next steps? Let's plan first, plant later. Add any vertical elements to the plan you started. Also, if you're planning on growing tomatoes, decide if you want to grow them vertically or add a cage, since they need some kind of support. On this slide, I have an elevated garden that a master gardener built for me. You can see a PVC pipe trellis that he made. This was designed to hold the yard-long beans that I grew that year. There are some construction plans for this setup in the elevated beds and benches document. I hope you learned some useful information about vertical gardening when associated with square foot gardening and are able to implement it.